Welcome to Across the Pond Wargamers, a podcast dedicated to the wargaming hobby. Tonight's topic is a question of scale.
Colin and I want to welcome you, Mark, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we start off the show. Want to start off with let you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your interests. How did you get into the hobby, and then the background of Scale Creep Miniatures?
So I'm quite a bit of an outlier, actually, in the wargaming world, because most wargamers you talk to, they've been gaming since they were 9 in the early Mesozoic era. And I came to it really very, very late. I went to college, had a career, got married, and I was probably 36 or 37. And my wife was looking for a birthday present for me. And I was reading a lot. I've always read a lot of military history. I was reading a lot of Civil War. And she remembered that when I was a kid, I liked to build model planes. And so she stopped into a hobby shop and bought me a package of plastic Civil War soldiers to sort of paint. I had painted Dungeons and Dragons figures. And that sort of got me back into this kind of hobbying thing. Because, of course, the box only had the soldiers. She thought it was a whole kit with little paint with a brush. And that drove me back to, now I need paints and brushes. And that sort of started. So for the first couple of years, all I did was paint figures. I had no thought of gaming. In fact, I actually ended up starting with 15 millimeter Napoleonics. And I would base an entire unit on one base. And I would just make the base big enough for the unit. Then after a year or two, we had a daughter, and when she was probably about a year old or maybe 18 months, my wife she's the breadwinner. We both had a big corporate job, and we never saw our daughter. And so I decided to be a stay-at-home dad. After a year or two of that, I thought maybe I'll start a little miniatures business. I could do it by email and internet, so I wouldn't, so while I'm taking care of the daughter, I can do it when I need to. And by coincidence, there was a gentleman in Canada who wanted to get out of the business. He sold the Fantassin range of Napoleonics. So I bought his stock from him, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been, now my daughter's 18 and ready to start college in the fall, so it's been 14 years, I guess, 14, 15 years I've been doing it. So that's how I got into the hobby, and that's how Scale Creep started. As for my interests, I would say primarily I like most periods to a certain degree, starting in the sort of the horse and musket era. But my preference is big battles. I do a lot of skirmish gaming because it's what you can get people to play, but it's not what I prefer. I always want to be Wellington. I always want to be Patton. I'm not really interested in being, Sergeant Rock or Richard Sharp. I want to win the war, not capture the farmhouse. So, but I have a pretty extensive collection at this point. I do like to paint, but I'm very slow. So I've made very good use of eBay and flea markets, and I'm very good at there's an early war French army, boom, that's done. And I'm also not fussy. I know a lot of gamers who are very, very fussy about my basing has to match, the flocking has to match. Not me. I mix it all together. So, like I said, I'm a bit of an outlier. I have my quote-unquote lead mountain is a lead storage box. So, it's just sort of, again, came to the hobby from a different route than most as an adult, not a kid. So, anyway, that's where I'm here.
That is a different route. I know everybody I always talks about their progression, and you're the first one I've ever talked to who has gotten started in it that late in life and has gotten so much into it that late in life. So it goes to show there's hope for everyone. Well, at this point, we want to generally talk about what we've all been working on, and kind of what's happening out there. The activities, in the past week or 2 weeks since we taped our intro show, I've gotten a few more of our figures based for Leipzig that that have already been painted, and I'm rebasing those. And I've recently, as of yesterday, actually got a reprint of the map for the board game Leipzig, so we can label them, and Colin and I can then start playing that via Portal. Mark, I think I mentioned to you, Colin's on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, so we have
I'm on the third coast.
And
so.
you're on the third. Well, I grew up, I shouldn't say grew up. I spent a lot of time, about 6 years, living on Lake Michigan, up on the Michigan side. So, yes, people, when you tell people from California that you can go surfing on Lake Michigan, they think you're crazy until they see the waves. So,
right.
Yeah. So I know perfectly what you mean when you say the third coast. What else? Well, I'm trying to think, look around that's pretty much it. It's been pretty busy with my day job, so haven't gotten as much done. Colin, what about you? I know you've been painting and basing.
Not as much as I'd like to. We actually started going back to work here. Well, of course, my job's a little bit more aggressive than most, but I haven't really gotten much done. I've painted some boots, some shakos, some backpacks on Italian infantry. That's pretty much it. And then I've based some more American Indian War infantry, and I have yet to get around to the cavalry. But yeah, I just bought them from Mark. The little Blue Moon figures. They're great. They're beautiful. I love them.
Yeah, they do look good.
That's all I've done. It's not much at all.
All right. So, Mark, what about you? What activities are you working on right now on your project table?
So,
besides keeping the business going,
right? Yeah. Well, so one of the things I did, this is about 6 weeks ago. My wife's currently looking for a job, so we have a relocation is likely in our future. We hope not, but and so when you look at your stuff and you're like, oh, I have to move all this, and it's not move ready. So that's been part one, is going through boxes, making sure they're labeled and sorted, and that stuff's not loose and going to just fall apart when we move. But that prompted me to look at my sort of lead mountain, my shelf of shame. And because I'm a little bit OCD about these kinds of things, I have a box for every project. It's labeled. So this is all my unpainted 15 millimeter Vietnam. Now my boxes are all pretty small. They're a half a shoebox or smaller, because I don't really keep a lot of unpainted stuff around. But what I've been doing is just kind of hopping from flitting around like a butterfly. So I've got a giant and a troll that I'm painting up for sort of fantasy. I've got a box of fortifications for a Vietnam fire support base that I'm painting. I've got a unit of French Laguerre in 15 millimeter, and then I've got 2 companies of T-72s and micro armor. And I sort of bounce around. My painting table is in our den. I live in a 2-bedroom condo, so there's not a separate room. So I have fallen into the habit of, when I cook or I can sit down and paint for 15 minutes, which is nice. So instead of sitting down for an hour, I sometimes do sit down for an evening, but mostly it's okay. Well, I'm waiting for the water to boil to make spaghetti. Sit down and okay, this giant's got 3 shields. He's using his kneecaps. Well, let's paint those. All right, some blue, some green, and I'm done. Okay, so I've only done 2 little bits. So I hop around like that all the time. Like, oh, I have 20 minutes. I'll do the treads on these T-72s. All right, time to make spaghetti. Then I put it aside, and so I flit. I'm not at all organized in that sort of, I'm going to make the army for Gettysburg and start with I just sort of bounce around. So I'm continuing. My big thing is I have 2 projects that are sort of longer term, if that's the way to put it. So what I want to do is I'm going through all my lead mountain to either paint it or sell it, or get, whatever, take care of it. And and then I'll start in on those 2 projects. So, which is a Lord of the Rings project and a Soviet tank brigade and micro armor. So,
sounds good. I like the idea of being able to just paint a little bit at a time and get to it when you can. It seems like you can get things accomplished, at least as you're chipping away. But I want to use your quote shelf of shame, if you don't mind.
Please do.
I like that term.
I can't claim it's mine. I read it. People were talking about. I think, to be honest, we talk about the lead mountain. I think is a common phrase. I think the shelf of shame is actually, if you make the plastic model kits, like the Revell monogram. I think that's their version of that. But yeah, by all means, feel free to use that.
Okay. And if you go to sell off any of your painted lead, and it happens to be 6mm Bacchus, suitable for the 1812, 1813 campaign, give me a shout.
Keep it in mind. Yeah.
Colin, when Mark and I were talking previously, setting this up, he mentioned that he's got the figures for Leipzig already painted in base.
Oh, wow.
So, Mark, that's our Colin and I's big project is Leipzig and Borodino. So, because, I mean, if you're doing Russians for Leipzig, you might as well just do a few more and have them for Borodino as well. You're all set.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, now we're going to new and shiny. Some things that have been out there on the gaming world that we've seen that have been new. We like to talk about what's been new and shiny, and then also what type of things we saw out there that are resurrected at this point. And for myself, the couple of things I've noticed. Well, first of all, I actually backed a Kickstarter this past week, or actually a week and a half ago. Don't know if you ever heard of Wow Buildings. The guy does STL designs for 3D printing of terrain that you can scale in any scale. Scale up and down, and for $20, he's doing a Vietnam range, and so I did a $20 backing of his Kickstarter, and it was already funded within hours of him starting. But some of the designs on them are just fantastic, so I'm looking forward to seeing how they work and how they print out. So that's one. The other one is Empress Miniatures has released their Vietnam range, I shouldn't say released, has added to their Vietnam range. Recently, they released a Marine Recon team from Vietnam. Now, of course, I had to give Paul a bit of a chat to about that's not Marine Recce, it's Marine Recon. Getting him to teach him American English. So, but he's made that correction already on his website. But yeah, no, that's some really nice figures there on Empress Miniatures. And the last one, Colin and I were, for the new and shiny, Colin and I were talking about before you joined, Mark, was Warlord's Victory at Sea game. Because, one, I like naval wargaming, and anything we can do to promote naval wargaming is great. Problem is, I have a whole bunch of 1/2400 scale ships. They're releasing it in 1/1800 scale ships. And I think that is going to translate nicely into the topic that we're going to be addressing in a little bit here around figure scale. Colin, you see anything else new, or have you seen anything?
For new stuff?
Yeah.
I know Battle Group, the rule group, Battle Group, that Plastic Soldier Company is selling.
Yeah.
They're going to release Pacific later this year. There's no release date yet, but it looks like some fun ground games for either small or large scale battles in the Pacific. I know the variation in battles, especially from early war to late war, it's interesting to play out. And then right after that, they're going to come out with the Eastern Front Russian late or North and South battle group rule books, which I think they'll be interesting, but I'm probably not going to get.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that Pacific one sounds good because for 6 mil, doing a beach invasion or something could be fun.
Oh yeah.
On that front. So, Mark, anything new out there? Any new products out there?
Well, for me, I think Brigade Models, who do predominantly science fiction coming out of the UK,
right?
they switched over to 3D modeling for masters. So they now basically they are 3D printing the master, but they're still selling metal.
Right.
He's got great new stuff coming out all the time. A couple of new aeronefs, which is kind of a Victorian science fiction flying ships.
Right.
Kind of game. Just great stuff. And he did a 6mm science fiction monorail. Which comes with elevated tracks, ground level tracks, a ramp to connect the two, and you can you can buy all the bits and bobs separately. We'll be bringing those in here to the U.S. to my shop soon. The other thing I'm looking at is that North Ag, again from the Battle Group guys. It's their Cold War rule set, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I'm impatiently awaiting my pre-order of Oathmark, the fantasy mass battle rule set. I'm a huge rule book collector, so I'm always excited about new rule books. And people are like, "What are you going to play that with?" I'm like, "No, I just want the book." So rule books tend to always hit my radar screen. Again, I'm an outlier. I often say I'm done as far as collections go. I have all the armies I want. I'll add to them. I'll buy another tank. I'll buy another unit, but there's not another period out there waiting that I want to get into. So I'm somewhat inoculated against the shiny new. I see the new games come out, and they, I'm kind of done to a certain degree. It's not dogmatic. If I see something I want, I'll get it, but just nothing has tempted me so far. So.
See, I'm just the opposite. I have no self-discipline. So.
I'm not claiming I have any. I'm just saying, I've indulged. I'm just kind of. So those are a couple of things that I've seen. The other thing I think just in general, in terms of new, is this absolute revolution that's going on with 3D printing. Yeah. The laser cutters came along and gave us all this really great terrain that came, sort of simple kit to put together. I just put a church together last night. It's painted, it's sort of like spend an hour and I'm done. I don't have to wash it and prime it. And just a little white glue and I'm done. I've got a nice church. But the 3D printing, I just think is. I think in 20 years, people are going to look back and be like, you did mail order and people sent you chunks of metal? Did you bang rocks together for heat? Oh, my God. Right? Oh, you just print. Because now I saw now it's a $30,000 machine. It's a 3D printer that can print essentially a painted miniature.
Multiple color. I think was it 6 to 8 different colors?
The one I saw, again, it's like a $30,000 or $40,000 machine. It's like your inkjet, whatever color you want, because the spool it mixes the spools on the fly. So just like your inkjet only has a couple of colors in there, it mixes yellow and blue to get green. This mixes effectively yellow spool and blue spool to get green, right? And then heats that and shoots it, and so you get. Now, I don't think it could do shading, but I think it could, from some of the examples I saw, like you could do something even as complex as a French Napoleonic soldier with the turnbacks and the straps and the buttons. It would all, the blue coat would be blue. The white pants would be white. There'd be no shade highlight kind of thing. But I could see that being one of those, either A, you don't care, or B,
wash it. A quick wash.
Say, okay, I'm going to print a couple with a couple different blues and a couple different whites and get that right, and then Agrath Earth shakes over the whole thing and done.
But of course, people will still argue about the buttons on it.
Yes, they will. So. I try not to play with those people. Because I'm one of those heretics who, like for a World War II game, whatever model of Panzer IV this needs to be today, it is. Because I'm not buying 900 Panzer. There's a limit. But my Panzer IVs are long barrel or short barrel. I don't, and if it's going to drive you crazy, my Panzer IVs have the wrong coupler, then you need to play at the game over there. So,
well, I am a strict adherent to the 3-foot rule, and 3 foot with my eyesight, not the youngster's eyesight. So let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with that. But all right. Well, Resurrection too. We also talk about something that was we're interested in resurrecting from the past, not necessarily new, but kind of a focus, whatever. And we're in North Carolina here. We're starting to prepare for coming out of the shutdown and lockdown. Stores are starting to open up with minimal, with restrictions on how many people can enter. So my local hobby shop, Hobby Chest in Jacksonville, is not open yet, but there's been some communication about by the end of May and beginning of June. Mm-hmm. So I'm already trying to plan out what game I'm going to host down there, because at Hobby Chest, I'll host a game. I'll bring both sides, because a lot of the guys who come over to play there, they live on base, so they don't have a great deal of storage and things like that. And plus, I'm trying to lure away a bunch of Warhammer 40K players into proper wargaming. And I know I'm going to
that'll start a fight.
I know I'll get shot for that one, but I had to put the dig in.
I'll get you some emails.
But what I wanted to do is, so I'll bring in both sides. So I'm thinking of either resurrecting, bringing back Lion Rampant, which is not a very old set of rules. Mm-hmm. Not when you look at Tractics or Chainmail or things like that, or Force on Force, one of the two. So I've been kind of flipping through those while I'm on conference calls, and I probably can't believe I just said that while I'm being recorded. So there's a documentation of me looking at wargaming while I'm at work. But anyway, so I'm thinking of resurrecting one of those, or bringing one of those back and hosting a game in that area. They're not terribly old, and that. Colin, I know you're still, working on the Pony War and the Yellow Ribbon and that. So, anything else you're bringing back?
Not really. I'm trying to keep focused on my small amount of topics. I got the little girl that I'm trying to raise, and that takes up a good amount of time. Don't regret it, but
she's his daughter's too young to hold a brush yet, but that'll change eventually.
Yes. Oh yeah, it will. It will. She's gonna paint horses first.
There you go.
Yeah, that was where we started. Yeah. My daughter's, our whole family were very crafty. But yeah, I remember the first time she's like, "Daddy, let's paint together." I still remember that was really
victory.
Yeah. Well, and the beauty of it, you can just dig around in your bits box, because she doesn't care. She was 5 or 6, so 6 guys, horses, that was her thing too. So it was like she wanted 6 cavalry, and she just went to town. It was like Jackson Pollock did a miniature. It was hilarious. But we had a great time. It was a lot of fun.
Well, limit her colors, and that way you can have an Appaloosa.
Oh no. We were in the 64 color box. We were all
okay.
Pink stripes and turquoise splotches and yellow polka dots. You name it. It was fun.
Which tribe was it that painted their horses different colors?
A lot of the Plains tribes actually painted their horses different colors. I can't remember what all the symbolism means, but I know of it is a lot to relate with the spiritual world and to guide their horses.
Well, so you could have had her do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing on resurrecting, by the way, Mark, I was flipping through your site, just kind of going through, and I noticed that you've got your Magister Militum. Mm-hmm. I can never say their range right. The ACW on sale right now. Mm-hmm. Those are some nice figures from their 10 millimeter. Really nice on those. Any reason for the markdown, or just moving product?
A couple of things. We're, at least in this family, getting close to retirement age, so I am scaling the business back. And part of that is driven by the fact that as my daughter heads off to college, I'm being put out to pasture as a stay-at-home dad. That probably happened 5 years ago, and I'm just getting the memo now. But I'm beginning to think about sort of the next phase of my life, and maybe going back to work, probably in a volunteer nonprofit type situation. Oh, but that might be kind of next for me. Now, we're a couple of years away from that. So step one, is wife gets a new job and we figure out where we're living, then I'll go figure that out. So some of it is just a lot of it's driven actually by when Bacchus and I sort of split up because he really couldn't support a U.S. dealer properly.
Right.
It just didn't work. And if he ever changes, hey Peter, if you're out there, I'll take you back.
Peter's actually lined up to be one of the guests in a future show.
Excellent. Anyway, so some of it's that thinking about transitioning. At some point I'm not going to have the business at all anymore, obviously. And then some of it's just sales related. I brought in some ranges to try to replace that Bacchus sort of spot, and 10 millimeter has really not taken off in this country. There's a few things out there. I mean, even I've talked to Old Glory, and their 10 millimeter, it's kind of okay, but it just hasn't sort of caught on. Right. So some of it's sales related, some of it's just scaling back. So yeah, they're really nice figures.
They're beautiful,
individually cast. So really cool. But
now, can I ask? Do you know how well? Because one of the things that I first learned about scale creep was doing a search for scale comparisons, and your little chart and blog came up, which I thought was great. How does the Magister Militum compare to GHQ's 10 millimeter ACW range?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
Okay.
So this is one of those curses some people may know. The other thing I do in the hobby is a website called deepfriedhappymice.com.
Yes, and
the story behind that name is really boring, so I'm not going to tell it. But when I started, as we mentioned, I started as a painter in 15 millimeter Napoleonics, and I did the same thing, looking for, clearly someone's done a police lineup, right? You buy one from everybody, and how hard could that be? No one had done it. I thought, well, I could do that. But when you do that, people then assume automatically you are the guy who knows how every brand goes with every other brand for every period. Dude, in 7 millimeter King Philip's War, do you think this mixes with that? Well, so I haven't had a chance to compare them. It's curse of being a retailer. How do your first core stack up with Gripping Beast? No idea.
I have Colin and I have a large collection of GHQ ACW, and I really like the way those Magister Militum look. And so I might have to get a pack and do the comparison for you and see if it adds in, because we're also thinking about things like Gettysburg, Chancellorsville. What other ones down the road were we talking about, Colin?
What was it, Shiloh?
Shiloh, that was the other one mentioned. So, we've got our big battle, because I do a lot of skirmish, just like you had mentioned, because it gets people into the to play the game. That's what you can get somebody to play quickly. But I love the big battles.
Yeah.
So it gives you I may not want to be Patton, but at least somebody along those lines. So we'll play around there. But that kind of moves us into the topic for today, and the topic is question of scale. Okay, again, how does scale matter? How does figure scale impact your game, and how do you decide what the right scale is? So, we talked about a couple of different things going into this on figure scale. Figure scale has changed variety. Has changed vastly going through. I think the very first wargaming figures I ever bought were, again, the old, I think they were the Aerofix 176, 172nd scale plastic, soft plastics. Got those way back when. And those were, now I think they call them 20 millimeter. And then there's a question about how do you measure scale. So I guess, the first question is, how does figure scale impact our games? How do we view it. And the first thing that comes to mind in my viewpoint is the visual. What are we looking for? So what are your thoughts on what do you go for on a figure scale for the when you're looking at it to get into a game, or is it the visual impact, or how do you start with that?
Absolutely. For me, the hobby is entirely about spectacle. Right? That's why I do, aside from the social aspect. But, so for me, the first thing I have in my head when I think about a game is the aesthetic that I'm going for. Sometimes that might be what I'll call photorealism, a really detailed table that if you saw a picture of it, you almost wouldn't know if it was real or not, right? Like where you got all the fences and every little bush and all that kind of stuff. That's one aesthetic. But I've also gone for an aesthetic that is more situation room, where the map's somewhat abstract. It's kind of that Battle of Britain where the ladies move the planes with those long pool cue things. That's a map, and it's got a certain look. It's not going to fool you into thinking it's real, obviously. So I start from the aesthetic. So one that I think a lot of people here can relate to is the old American Heritage or Time Life book series about the Civil War or world history, where they'd have those spread leaf pictures of battles.
Right.
And they were somewhat cartoony in that the whole battle is jammed into sort of, a really tiny space, but it had a very, very distinct look. And so that's where I start. And so sometimes if I'm going for photorealism, then I probably am looking for much more of all my scales have to match. And then I start to think about, if is the unit, the picture of an individual soldier, or is it of a unit? And so if it's an individual soldier, then I'm inclined to go to a larger figure. If I'm trying to give the impression of a unit, I'm probably more inclined to go down to smaller figures. And that's kind of where I start. And that drives all the choices of that game. So I often use undersized terrain deliberately. So I'll use 3mm buildings with 6mm troops. That way I can have a little beer coaster for a village and have 12 buildings on the beer coaster, right? And it looks like a village. Now, the soldiers are taller than the houses, and that bothers some people. That's an aesthetic choice. So for me, I start with that aesthetic. What kind of a visual impression am I trying to give? And that drives all the choices of terrain, figures, and to some degree, rules.
I know one of the things that I come across when I host a game, when you get people who are tied to a company, so to speak, meaning their Games Workshop or their Warlord Games or their, and when I say this, I'm not dissing any of these other game companies or that, but I always get the question, oh, what game, who makes this game? Well, okay, those buildings are made by Foreground. Those figures are from Empress. These rules are by, Mongoose Publishing. These rules are, and you just see them glaze over when you start to explain. They're like, but can't you just get it in a box? And you start to explain to them, it doesn't matter about that. It's a point there. And then I think the one that we had mentioned briefly in a prior conversation that to me is a perfect example is Flames of War.
Yep. Excellent
figures, beautiful figures. Battlefront does a great set of figures, but the game itself lends itself to the parking lot. The biggest criticism I hear of Flames of War is parking lot tanks, tread to tread, lined up, whatever. And I've played a game of it once with using 1/285th scale. Changes the game completely without changing the rules one iota.
Right.
So how do we get that across? Or so that leads me to the question is, does the figure scale matter when you're playing a set of rules?
Yeah, I come out on the side of almost entirely no. Almost entirely no. Because this comes up sort of from a different direction often of what's the best set of rules for 6mm World War II or 20mm World War II. And I always say, who cares what forget the millimeter, say, what's the best set of World War II rules? Then tell me what you want to play. Do you want to command a squad, a section, a platoon, a company, or a battalion? And then we can have that debate. But telling me what size your soldiers are doesn't matter. And there are a few constraints. You're not going to play Fistful of Toes, which is where every tank is a platoon, in 28 millimeter, unless you own a barn and have a table you can walk on. But yeah, no, I don't think it does. And I think the way I have approached breaking people of the does it come in a box habit, I did with Flames of War. I, like you, I play Flames of War and Team Yankee with micro armor. And I went to my local game store. They had a Flames of War day, and I would run games. I'd bring both sides. And same thing. You get that big wide-eyed look like, can you do that? Like, Battlefront's not going to show up and arrest me. I mean, yeah. And I think the way to break people of that habit is to start with the box game and then shift one aspect. So, no, these are the exact same rules you played with on that table with 15 millimeter, but here the tanks are smaller. The template is the same 6-inch template. So if you're used to putting all your tanks side by side, don't do that. Spread your, spread out. And it changes the aesthetic. And it really, again, I think it looks much better. I see the same thing, too, with, rule books, like you say, the Lion Rampant,
Right.
that family of rule books. We play a lot of that in my club, Dragon Rampant, Men Who Would Be Kings, and so on. And we play the Men Who Would Be Kings with 6 millimeter figures. Now, I do a Zulu Wars game where I just use one base per figure. So you're supposed to have 12. I use 12 bases. Well, the bases are 40 by 30 millimeter with 30 Zulus on it. Still one base. It's one base. You get one kill, I take a base off. Sometimes if we're trying to play in a smaller space, I'll use half the number. Each base counts 2.
Right.
But we don't change a thing for the rules. The measurements are the same. I play Rebels and Patriots in 15 millimeter. And people will say, are those 28 millimeter figures? No. What rules changes do you make? None. Why? That 12-inch range, which makes it look like you can't shoot to the other side of the dining room table in 28s, at least in my brain, suddenly looks right when I switch to 15s. And I already have the 15s. I don't have to buy new troops. I can just play the stupid game. So I really don't think it matters, but I agree. I think it's a real blind spot. I think people think that a miniature is somehow dramatically different from a war game counter, right? That Flames of War base is effectively a half-inch counter and squad leader, right?
Right.
It's it's got a firepower value, a morale value, a defense value, whatever. We don't print the numbers on there, although some people do. It's a counter. And so I think, what matters is the counter, not the figure.
So then when does a situation arise when it does matter? To me, I'm of the same vein. I'm about the aesthetic. I'm about the ability to capture the flavor. And modern warfare, big battles are about maneuverability.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have, you could have a base representing, base of 6 figures representing a battalion in Napoleonic warfare of 28 millimeters. But to me, that doesn't visually, and again, it's a preference on that part. But I want to have enough room to be able to maneuver. So therefore, my bases have to be smaller. I have to be able to have that because maneuver is the important element. But when does it matter on what figure? I mean, I personally can't think of one off the top of my head. There's got to be some out there.
Yeah, there are some, especially when the big place that really figure/base size really starts to matter a lot is when you get into indirect fire. Because think, for example, you have, let's say, an 18-inch stretch of road.
Right.
And in your rule set, let's say that represents a mile. Okay. if I'm doing indirect fire to interdict that road, right, how many vehicles are on that road that I can kill? In 1/285th, probably 30.
Right.
In 10 millimeter, probably 20. In 15 millimeter, probably 9. In 20 millimeter, probably 6. And so you do run into a situation, for example, where, if you're if you're changing vehicle scales and you've got area effect weapons, and this would apply to science fiction too, I suppose, that being under the template is suddenly driven by the size of your tank and not, so if you say, no, you're only under the template if the commander's hatch is under, then it probably doesn't matter. But you do run into situations where, I've seen situations where people say, I want to play this rule set in a different scale. That works if you keep the base size the same, but if you need to adjust the bases, then things get weird. But mostly, no. Mostly it's fungible. Like I said, you can play, you can play with 28 millimeter tanks if you own a barn.
Right.
But you better own a barn. So the other thing I would say is, it doesn't matter if you're willing to make an adjustment, right? I really want to play a divisional sized game of Flames of War with 28 millimeter tanks. Okay, then get a barn and go to town, right? You'll have to figure that out.
Right. But then you're modifying the rules. You're at least modifying a scale.
Your measurements, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to make everything's going to be feet instead of inches or whatever.
Right.
So you see that in reverse. People who have very small spaces often convert a rule set from inches to centimeters and drop down the figure sizes.
Well, I'm guilty of that. I've done that from going from 28 millimeter to 10 millimeter using black powder.
Right.
So yeah, I'm guilty.
I don't think it does.
Yeah.
But it can matter in the aspect of the hobby, like as in model building. So if you're a person that does like to, say, paint larger things and have all the shades of the colors in the front height of the horse or the front quarter of the horse, then yeah, scale will definitely matter, because you definitely can't paint that on the smaller scales. If you like the actual building process of putting certain arms to certain torsos, you like different head poses, then yeah, scale definitely matters, because there's not a lot of options in some of the smaller scales in order to have different looks of the individual figures.
Your normal wargamer is not able to work at a jeweler's level of manipulating a 6 millimeter head on a body there. It's crazy.
And more to the point, why would you bother in 6 millimeter? Why would you bother?
You can't
You're not
see
going to be able to tell anyway, right? You're doing a 28 millimeter. You're doing Pony Wars. You're like, I'm going to swap this Indian's head with that guy's body. You're going to get a noticeably different looking figure. 6 millimeter, who'll know, right?
No. That's one thing. When I do large battles in tiny scales, 6 millimeter, 10 millimeter, the large scale battles. Skirmish, I do in 28, because to me it becomes about the aesthetic. It becomes about, how does it look on the table and that. And price enters into there a little bit too.
Yeah.
Have to consider that, because, we're, 10,000 6 millimeter figures is a little cheaper than 10,000 28 millimeter figures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a bit.
Just a touch.
Yeah.
But and it's but then again, when we're looking at the different scales, there's an abstraction that goes into any type of wargaming. It's very few wargaming gets to be 1-to-1. Now you have your skirmish scales where one figure is one person. So that 28 millimeter becomes less of there's no abstraction in that, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're starting to abstract, that one figure becomes 50, 100. To me, the larger scales require more of an abstraction, when a lot of our rules already take an account or already apply abstractions on the rules about what is attrition, what is fatigue, morale, etc.
Right.
Do we want that abstraction visually too? And to me, that's a question. How do we handle it? I don't like
Right,
I don't like my aesthetics to be too abstracted, because my brain's already having enough trouble wrapping its head around the abstraction of the fatigue or a lot or whatever. So,
yeah, I think, again, this is again where I go back to, I said, when I start a game, I think of the aesthetic. Last convention I went to, there was a guy who had a pike and shot game, right? And he was using paper flats. So there's a guy who makes books where the idea is you photocopy the pages of the book onto cardstock and cut the soldiers out and fold them over, and you end up with a, sort of painted, two-dimensional. And so what he had done is he had made the very deliberate decision of, rather than putting out a typical wargaming table, he had trees that were made by printing out two trees and forming in the shape of an X, that sort of interleaving.
Yeah. So they lock through and
the buildings he had done, instead of just doing a box, he made sure the walls sort of had that intersectionality. So it was clearly, obviously pieces of cardboard slotted together. Now, he had done a really nice job with everything, but you walked by that table and it was quite arresting. I was like, that's cool. But it's not, again, I go back to my photorealism, not remotely going to fool me, but it looked cool. Like, wow. And it also, in my brain, was like, and that would be cheap. Right? I mean,
I like where you go with that.
Cardstock. And that's like a box of cardstock, a box of ink, and a Saturday afternoon with a pair of scissors watching hockey. That's a good day. And I can do this English Civil War. So I bought the book, but I haven't, done the photocopying. But the other thing that we haven't sort of talked about yet too, and you mentioned it with the 28s and the skirmish, is one thing I don't think people often appreciate is how many different scales there are in a game.
Right.
Talk about a skirmish game, and that one soldier represents one guy, but the ground scale is rarely 1/50th or 1/100th. It's
right.
That gun shoots 12 inches. That tells me that ground scale is 1 inch is 50 or 100 yards, or it shoots 24 inches, but it's not in scale with the guy. And so that leads to all sorts of other squishy abstractions. And I'm thinking about this a lot these days. As I mentioned, I'm doing a 15 millimeter Vietnam firebase. Well, that's hard to do, right? Because 15 millimeter, let's say it's 1/100th scale. Well,
right.
Those fire bases are, 3/4 of a mile in diameter.
Right. Huge.
They're huge. Even the small ones are really big relative to, let's say, a 6x4 table. So I'm trying to figure out how to get it down to a 4x3 footprint, right? But you run into this problem that, well, the 155 millimeter gun and its emplacement is kind of 5 inches across. You can't really change that. I mean, I could make an emplacement that was 3 inches across, and the gun would stick out, over one side, and the trail would stick out the door, so to speak. That looks dumb. So right. I'm not going to, it's like, I'm not going to worry too much about getting the details of the firebase right, because they're going to be so wrong to start with. And it's not just horizontal scale, it's vertical scale. Because the most common thing I see in war games, and you'll have a 28 millimeter figure and a 28 millimeter building. And the building might be 6 inches tall and the figure's 1 inch tall, and they're 6 inches apart, but that's 60 yards. So the horizontal scale is different than your vertical scale.
Right.
And your time scale is different than your horizontal scale, so to speak. If you look at any horse and musket rule set, most speeds are what I call box scale. Infantry is 6, cavalry is 12. Why is that? Because if it's any bigger, then on turn 1, everybody's on everybody else's rear areas because the tables are small. But if you look, you talk to horse people, and you say, a horse trots at about 3.5 miles an hour.
Right.
If you scale that up to any war game rule set you have that has any kind of time scale, that's a mile every 20 minutes. If you have a 20-minute turn, that's 1,800 yards, roughly, That's usually like 36 inches in many tactical rule sets.
Right.
I haven't met one yet that lets you move cavalry 36 inches in a turn. And that's at a trot. That's just kind of walking around. If they're in a hurry, they can go anywhere. So, yeah, so the scales, you know, I think ultimately a lot of it comes back to aesthetic. And as Colin was saying, it comes back to the modeling aspect. Do you get off and really love putting the little grenadier symbol on the, you know, pouch? And do you like doing the buttons and the lace and the patches and, you know, all the little shells and the ammo pouches and that kind of thing? That drives a lot of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to interrupt you to give a public compliment to Colin on his Russian Hussars in 6mm. He did do the lace. I can barely see it. He did it. So I'm painting it. But anyway.
Yeah.
When we go back, you know, there's, you know, a lot of things I think people consider when they're getting into scales, or, you know, they're talking about the price, the aesthetics, you know, how can they model it, you know, the ease of it. And then again, storage is always a big piece. I mean, one reason why I started going into 6mm, one of the big things I found was, you know, the aesthetic. But then as I started to do it, I found, wow, I can fit armies in cigar boxes. And suddenly my shelf of shame doesn't look nearly as big as it did before. So, you know, I could fool myself into believing there's not as much. But when we're looking at this, where do we think, you know, we look back at the old Jack Scrubby figures and the minifigs and the, you know, the old figure ranges that have built up over the years. Where are we going to be going with scale? Where do we see ourselves going with scale in the next few years? 2, 5, 10, 20 years?
Well, you know, it's funny because, you know, if you think about it right now, at least in the common parlance, if you want to do the Civil War, you have a choice between 2mm, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, and the new 18, 20, 25, the new 28s, and then 40s.
All right.
54s. And we still see people coming out in new scales, which is very interesting to me. You know, you were saying the sort of the new Plastic Soldier Company moderns are going to be 12mm. Okay, so
there's another scale
there,
to look
now
at.
That's existed before, but the only people I knew in it really, in terms of like you know, is minifigs. Minifigs has a big one, and they call it 1/144/12mm. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but they're really the only ones. And Pendraken is out there doing 10. You got Battlefront in 15. The whole world's in 20. Why do you go halfway? And you know, one of the things I did about 10 or 12 years ago, I had a much bigger shelf of shame, and I emptied out the closet. Same thing. I laid it all out on the basement floor. I was like, what the hell am I? My hobby is not collecting pieces of tin to stick in a closet. And one of the things I decided at that time was I'm going down to 2 scales, 6mm and 15mm. Lord of the Rings in 28, but that's the only thing I do in 28 is Lord of the Rings. And a huge part of that is not the army storage is not hard. Terrain.
Yeah.
You know, you buy 9 buildings for a Rohan village, and it's a whole footlocker all by itself.
Right.
And it's great for Rohan, but then if you decide, I want to do an orc village, I need another footlocker. Whereas A, if you consolidate your scales, but B, for me, the big reason to ditch 28s was the size of the terrain. I take I've got one of those big plastic storage tubs full of I have a Martian village. I've got 35 buildings in there. I can do a really cool, and it's a big, you know, it's impressive. Right. If I would try to do that in 28, you know, I'd need a U-Haul trailer. So for me, the storage is not so much the armies, it's the terrain. Especially if, like you try to do sort of intricate tables, roads and bushes and fences and pig pens and, sheep in the fields and churches and all that stuff. It gets enormous fast. So, that's another consideration, and the cost of that too.
Right.
You want to do a new battle and you need 5 new buildings in 6mm. Not bad. You can paint those buildings in an afternoon. 28mm, kind of a major investment. But again, back to Colin's point though, too, 6mm, base coat, dry brush, couple of details, you're done. You may be more of it. No, I kind of want to spend some time on the new farmhouse and make a little window box and, weather the door. And, we've got a guy in our club has a building where all the stones are individually painted for one of those field stone chimneys. And I'm like, it looks great, but I'd buy it, but I'm not painting it.
That's crossing into model railroad detail.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, when we're looking at this, I know I'd like to think that companies that are doing a lot with 28mm now, like Warlord Games, what they're pushing, the Perrys, are good for introducing new people into the historical aspect of the hobby. So I do not ever want to say anything negative about any of them. I think what they're doing is great. I have a lot of their figures on all of them. I just use them for myself for skirmish and that. I think when we look at the future, if we can use these variations to build something to pull people into the hobby, it's a good thing.
I agree. Yeah.
Going back to, this Victory at Sea by Warlord Games that's coming out. As I said, the scale that they've gone with the ship scale will not match the ground scale. It. There are no naval war games that are fun to play where it does match the ground scale, just because.
Well, my Jutland in 1/6000. I can do that. 1/6000. I can do in ground scale.
What's the range? Because that's miles. You're still shooting 12 miles.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I condense it, but you can do it on a long table. But it's not necessarily the range; it's more the speeds. Right. The speeds correspond to the ship size. You don't get that. Oh, my battleship in a half an hour moves 2/3 of a battleship's in, sort of that kind of thing. You can do the ranges. That just becomes pointless because you can't hear the other guy on the other side of the table. So you shrink that. But no, I agree. I think one of the things, just to get back to an earlier point about people who have a blind spot because what box do I buy to get this game? And you're like, no, the miniatures come from. I think that's one thing that Battlefront and Games Workshop and so on have done very, very well. And I wish more people would do on the historical side. Is one of the things Battlefront did with Flames of War, and it's a reason I have a boatload. I have thousands of their figures. Is you buy one pack, it's a complete platoon.
Right.
Most, like if you go to Old Glory, I like their figures, but you buy a pack of command and a pack of riflemen and a pack of mortarmen and a pack of machine gunners, and you got to you now have a project. I want a Marine platoon. I have a project. Battlefront, one click, kind of just like, give me the USMC #2, and it comes in the mail, and I'm done. I can get the painting because it's got all the appropriate mix. I think that's, as you say, getting people out of the 40K, maybe on the historical side. That's a big part of it. I think you can wean them off everything in one box, but when it's like, okay, let's get your army list and make it, and like, this is an accounting exercise. But if you say, hey, I mean, I do like, sort of I think that's where the plastics are doing a good job, where you buy my box and you can say, well, you can make this and use these heads. And we also give you those heads if you want to do grenadiers, or we give you, these options. I think that's one thing that's really, really helped. And the price is low.
Right.
I can buy one box. It's $35. I get a whole sort of skirmish set and I can play, versus I got to go to Empress's website, figure out which packs I need to get a force that works with these, that's not fun. And as a retailer, being able to put a box in a person's hand. Wow, that was fun. I really enjoyed that game, that Gary ran called Lion Rampant. Oh, would you like to play? Here's the rule book. It's $17.95. And if you liked Saracens, boom, here's a box set that'll get you a starter force. You'll want more stuff later, but here's a box. Oh, okay, $17 rule book, $35 box of figures. And I can go home and get to work, I think that taking advantage of that moment, gamers talk about ooh shiny and not having self-control. As a retailer, you want to be able to capitalize on that weakness, so to speak.
I agree completely on that. So, all right. Well, I'm keeping track of time at the same time as we're talking here, and unfortunately, these are things I could go on forever about. Colin, is there anything you want to add, or any questions, or anything you want to throw into the mix?
More so towards where we're heading. The advancements in technology are astounding. So back in, like, say, 1980, when some of the smaller scales are starting to come out, they're more crude. They're still good, but they're more crude than what they are today. And with digital technology, the refinement and molding process is becoming astounding. So I kind of see this trend where, especially, like, I also hunt on eBay for painted miniatures because, it's a time saver. But as we start to go on towards the future, these scales are going to get much better quality at much smaller scales. So I'm seeing all these small scales just get bought up immediately online, as where the larger scales are starting to hang around, and people are starting to have to repost their eBay posts because they're not as wanted for the mass battles. It's definitely large scale is more of a skirmish, and people are starting to move much smaller scales. And if you have a large scale army, then I'm sorry to say, maybe in 20 years, 10 years, you might have to buy a smaller one.
Yeah. The other thing, the other thing that I'm looking, I think is really interesting too, with the 3D and laser cut and all that is, to a certain degree, up until now, you bought what you could get. And if you were the kind of modeler who liked getting out the sheet styrene and hacking the thing and making what you wanted, last time I was at Little Wars, there was a 3D printing shop across the street from me in the vendor booth. And the guy came up and was like, I like this boat, but it's a little, and the guy's like, I can change that on the laptop. Yep, I'll print it overnight, come pick it up in the morning. So that guy got exactly what he wanted, 3D printed for, $30 or what, I don't know what the price was. And I mean, it was just, I think it's going to change how customers think. Why do I have to buy, about, vehicles and terrain and stuff? Like, why should I get not what I want? I can get exactly what I want.
And that is actually a topic of a show we have in a few weeks, or a few tapings, I should say, about 3D printing and how it impacts the hobby, and pros and cons. Pro for folks, cons for cons for retailers, pros for retailers, manufacturers, cons, etc. So we'll be touching that on next episodes coming up.
Look forward to it.
And wrap up, I want to say thank you very much, Mark, for joining us for today's show. Really appreciate that. We're glad to have you. I will be posting links to some of the things we spoke about today on the show notes, on the podcast show notes. Our next episode to be taped, we're still waiting on the final documentation on the releases, but we're looking to be talking about how to keep a club vibrant and relevant pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. And we're actually going to be having the members of the Old Meldrum's War Games Club on. So that'll be in a coming episode. But again, Mark, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was
from both of us. Thank you.
First time for me on a podcast. So that's cool.
Well, I'm glad we were able to help, and you're actually this is podcast episode number 2. You're our first guest, so it's a show of firsts.
Do I get a T-shirt or something?
I'll have to look into that, actually. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
All right. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for listening to Across the Pond Wargamers, and to all of our fellow wargamers out there, no matter which pond you are across, we hope you enjoy your gaming.